Good afternoon, listeners, and welcome to the second episode of Echoes of the Guilty, where we dive into the insane and deranged minds of some of the most notorious criminals around the world. I'm your host, Lily, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the most known axe murders in American history. A case so crazy and gross that I hated when I read the articles. This case was also one of the ones that I did briefly touch on in my Billy the Axeman episode last week, and that case is the Villisca Axe murder. The Villisca Axe murder case was where a family of six and two of their very close friends were murdered in the family home, and it is one of the most shocking cases in the town of Villisca. Now, a little warning before we dive in. I do want you all to be aware of the fact that since this episode does go deeper into the case and its gruesome details, if you believe that these details could potentially gross you out or be a trigger, I suggest you stop listening now. But if you are still here, I want you to grab your blankets and your popcorn and anything else you might need because we're about to dive headfirst into one of the biggest cases in American folklore. So, if you did listen to the last episode, exactly 1 year prior to this case was the Hill family murder in Ardenwald, Oregon, which puts this case at June 9th, 1912. This family is the Moore family, and they're two close friends from the Stillinger family. The Moores were a very well known family of six. The father was Josiah Moore with his wife Sarah and their four kids: Herman, age 11, Catherine, age 10, Boyd, age 7, and Paul, age 5. That night, Catherine had her two friends over, Lena Stillinger, age 12, and Ina Stillinger, age 8. And in all honesty, my heart broke for the Stellinger sisters' father because, he sent his kids over to the Moore house thinking they would come home the next day, and obviously they didn't. And I honestly don't know how he lived with the guilt of it all. But diving back into the case, June 9th was just a regular day. They did their morning chores, they went to evening church, had family time, and came home. And it sucks because they truly did believe that that day was just like any other day, but it took a gut-wrenching turn for the worst. Now, one thing to note from the investigation before I continue is that all of their neighbors said that they saw the family return from the First United Presbyterian Church around 10 p.m., and absolutely nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was just, like I said, an average night for the family. And in this small town, everyone knew everyone and their habits, routines, everything in between. So for the eight of them to be murdered, especially in that fashion, it left everyone in shock. And on top of it, for no one to see anyone come or go from the house after the family returned was even crazier. But to continue on, later that night someone was said to have broken into the home through the window near the entryway, because during the investigation, glass was found everywhere in the entryway. And once this person was in the house, he took Josiah's axe and beat Sarah and all six of the kids to death with the blunt end of it. But there was something completely different from when Josiah's body was found. When Josiah's body was found, his face was so unrecognizable that it made it extremely hard to identify him. He was beaten with the sharper end of the axe, and due to the severity of the way he was beaten, authorities believed that this attack could have been personal, which, when we get into the suspects later on, you can see why one of them was a suspect. But the bodies were found on June 10th when the neighbors noticed that nobody left the Moore house to do their chores, and Josiah, a man who always works, never comes into work late, and always answers the phone, didn't come in or answer. So obviously being concerned, one of the neighbors called Josiah's brother, which, on a side note, really is weird to me because of all people, why would you call his brother? I understand not wanting to get the authorities involved when it seems that there's no reason to get them involved in the first place, but it's weird. I know I could be wrong to think like, oh, why would you call a family member to check on the family when you haven't seen them at all? But it's weird because I mean, if you're suspicious of something, wouldn't you call authorities? Wouldn't you call somebody else like higher than the family? But anyways, when Josiah's brother went into the house, he discovered everybody, which I mean, I don't know. I feel like it kind of does validate the way that I was thinking, but at the same time, it's like nobody would have known if the brother didn't show up. So, I don't know. But after Josiah's brother found the bodies, the cops were called and there was now an open investigation. They brought in the town marshal, and when the marshal went in, according to Iowa cold cases, he had told one of the relatives of the Moore family that there was somebody murdered in every single bed. And from the investigation, there were very noticeable patterns from the past cases that I talked about. The bodies were moved and covered, windows again were covered, and the family was slaughtered by axe. But the cherry on top of it all was the fact that the mirrors were also covered, which gave authorities even more of an impression that this attack could have been personal. Because what they thought was that the killer might not have been able to look at himself after he committed the murders. Which, I mean, you just killed two adults and six kids, so I mean, if I was the killer, I would do the same thing, to be honest, because it's one thing to kill two adults, but to kill six kids all under the age of 13, it's I would be so disgusted with myself. And if this guy was disgusted with himself, like I don't blame him, but I don't know. It's disgusting because what did the kids ever do to you? That's what I'm thinking. Like, what did they do to you for you to kill them? But as the house was further investigated, authorities found a 4-pound slab of uncooked bacon next to the axe, which within itself is weird given the fact that from all of the other cases, the weapon that was used was always outside of the house, whether it was literally right outside the house or like when they used the bloodhounds for the scent trail, they were found at the intersection of two railways. And as I said earlier in the episode, glass was found in the entryway. And another new thing was that there was uneaten food and even eaten food found, and nearby was also a bowl of bloody water, which, I mean, if you're trying to clean blood off your hands or whatever, or even off the axe, like, why not do it in a bowl? And it is said to believe that the killer did potentially stay at the house for a few hours after the murder, which, you know, explains how there was eaten food and like their entire supply of bread was eaten. When I read the article, it said that their entire bread supply was eaten, and I mean, it didn't say how much bread they even had to begin with, but obviously it was enough to note that their supply was eaten, so who knows. But this case was such a long and drawn out case, primarily because there was so much mishandling of the scene and all leads went dead, which pisses me off. Because, I mean, why were there so many people coming in and out of the house? And why were there not any proper precautions put in place so that no mishandling even happened to begin with? And I mean, I understand that it was the 1900s, so there may not have been like that many supplies or access to things, but in order to become a part of law enforcement, it should be like noted like this is what should happen and this is what should not happen. But since there were so many people coming in and out. This case was now going nowhere but into a grave. But thankfully, as with the other cases, authorities brought out the bloodhounds, which came from Nebraska, and they tried to use a scent trail, but as with the rest of the cases, it went dead. So now there was nothing to go off of, and every lead that they had, including any leads on suspects, it was all dead. So they had nothing to go off of. But speaking of suspects, let's get into them. One of the primary suspects was Reverend George Kelly, who was known for his erratic behavior and mental instability. And fun fact was that he wasn't even from Iowa. It was noted that he was a traveling preacher. So the morning after the murders, when he left on a train and allegedly told one of the riders that 8 people were butchered in their beds, he was apprehended. And one thing to keep in mind with all of this is the fact that the case wasn't even publicized yet. So for him to even know any details of the case, that it was a huge red flag. And later on, he was apprehended, as I said, and he was interrogated. And during the investigation, he did confess, saying, "Suffer the children come unto me," which, in my opinion, is some freaky ass shit, because what do you mean by that? Like, ew. But not too long after this said confession, he ended up retracting it, and he got acquitted after 2 trials. One of the trials was in September, where he got acquitted by the jury for 11-1, and then one in November, but I don't know, like, what the ratio of it was, how many of the jury acquitted him, how many didn't, whatever. It wasn't said in the article. And so there was nothing really said more about the Reverend, but another primary suspect was a man that held a personal grudge against Josiah, which, as I said before, like, with how personal this attack seemed to be, it's kind of valid for this guy to be suspected. But they didn't really say why he was holding a grudge against Josiah. I mean, I tried to look into it, but I couldn't really find anything. But this guy was local businessman and state senator Frank Jones. And they said that he was a primary suspect solely because of this grudge he was holding against Josiah. And this man wasn't even taken at trial, so there was really nothing to go off of with that. But as we move on, this case still went dead, as I said before. There were no leads, no information, no suspects anymore. All that there was rumors and theories circulating around the town. And since the case went dead, the house has been preserved and is now one of the biggest tourist attractions in the United States. And the house is now open for tours and overnight visits. And it is said that this case has inspired so many books, films, and documentaries, which all are trying to solve this case on their own. Which, I mean, I don't. I mean, I understand in one sense, but in another, I really don't, because if you look deeper into this, like, there's. If they couldn't find any leads then, what really makes you think that you can find any now? I mean, you could say, like, if you were able to dig deeper into Frank Jones, for instance, like, sure, you might be able to figure out, like, hey, maybe this guy actually is the killer, but I, I mean, I doubt that now anyone would try to open up the case, like, authority-wise, because, I mean, it's been dead for over a century, so it's, I don't know. Like, what are they gonna do? Arrest a guy that's already dead? I mean, I don't know. This could just be me being an ass and, like, I don't know. It all depends on how you take it, so yeah. But a lot of you may know this case from Sam and Colby because they made a video of them going through the house and doing a deep dive into the case, and learning from the tour guides and everything like that. So shout out to them. I mean, they're not going to listen to this, but shout out to them. But honestly, I think that'll be all for today's episode of Echoes of the Guilty, where we dove deeper into getting to know Villisca. Now, is this case somehow connected to Billy the Axeman, or is it just some twisted coincidence? Nobody will ever really know, but I'm your host, Lily, and this has been Echoes of the Guilty. So stay safe, lock your windows, and never, ever ignore sounds of footsteps in the dark.